Hey guys, welcome to the Beer Thunder Christmas episode. I hope you guys are having a Merry Christmas, a Happy Holidays, a fantastic Kwanzaa, or whatever version of Christmas or winter holiday solstice season that your religion or non denominational faith happens to celebrate. Now, one of the things that I noticed on my last video was that people are bringing up StatShark and they're bringing up the flight model calculator and they're arguing points based on the flight model calculator. And guess what? The flight model calculator is a work in progress. And it still is. But on Christmas Eve, we did get a Christmas present from one of about three British people that I can tolerate, which is the flight model calculator has been updated so that the specific excess power values and turn rates that it provides for jets, including Delta Canards, the trianguloids, is more or less correct by my testing. And just to kind of clarify, when it comes to StatShark, I'm not like an official affiliate or anything like that, but I know the guy that makes it a little bit. I've associated with him in a couple dozen different Discords, and I have functioned for the program as basically kind of like quality assurance. And it's not really, I didn't take on the role, nobody asked me to do it. It's just like they have a Discord and you make bug reports. And what I did is I basically did the same thing I do on my other flight model videos where I do a turn, I compare it, and I was comparing what does WTRTI put out, what does the ride R2 sustained turn rate diagrams show, and what does StatShark show. And finally, it has gotten to a point where more or less all of these values sync up. Now, when it comes to specific excess power values that come from WTRTI, the values from StatShark are going to be a little bit different, and what it comes down to is, from what I can tell and from what Prey can tell and from what another one of the guys can tell, is that WTRTI is not doing that SCP calculation fast enough so that the information that is shown on the screen is actually just like a little bit delayed. It's a little bit delayed enough that your numbers are not going to be a perfect match. But if you take like basically the number that pops up a half a second later, these numbers will match. Now, with all that being said, let's go through how the flight model calculator works. You go up here to statshark.net and you go to FM calculator. And the one thing that we are going to be looking for is energy management diagrams. And we're going to be creating our own or using the program to make it for us and trying to talk our way through it and show what it does. Because what has prompted this is not just comments in my YouTube, but I'm seeing comments in game pop up. And one of the things that brought this on was I was in a match the other day. The guy brings up, oh, the Gripin's been nerfed to the ground. The Gripin's no longer relevant. The Gripin can't win a 1v1. The Rafale is better. There was a point where he made a comment like, oh, you think that the Gripin beats the Rafale? LOL. And it's like, yeah, I think it does. I think that it does. And the reason I think that it does is because I've spent a lot of time articulating and trying to understand why the Gripin is so good in the game and kind of where its strengths lie. And long story short, the big thing the Gripin has going for it is at high speeds, when you pull hard, it does not lose a lot of energy. And because of that, you can come in at high speed and you can gain a lot of position on another guy where kind of the lower end performance just doesn't matter. And that really ends up being the case for the Rafale. Now, when it comes to EM diagrams, a lot of people get really into the weeds about it, and they like to kind of wage the war inside of their head. And EM diagrams do not replace practical experience. They can supplement it. They can give you hints on how things can perform, but they don't make up for practical experience. So if someone says, who is like a good duelist who's respected in the dueling community, that X plane beats Y plane because of Z, that's still probably going to be correct in pretty much 99% of the time. My lane is not air RB, my lane is air SB, and air SB duels do play out a little bit different from air RB, where early position in air RB is a little bit more important because you can shoot further away and you can actually make those shots. A short range shot in air RB is like 500-600 meters, and in air SB that's a pretty hard shot to make for most people. You can push it out to about 1,000 if you're really good, if you get really lucky, but for the most part, in air RB, your shot distance is longer. It's easier to take a good position early on and be able to shoot from it. And then on the opposite end, In AirSB, where things get really dangerous is when things get really close, because of the way that SAS damping manual controls work, where there's no instructor limit. Planes can pull way more AOA than they can in AirRB. So once you get close, things like the Rafale, Eurofighter, they can pull 50 AOA before they try to stall themselves out, and they can kind of like just pirouette around themselves. So there's kind of like a flight dynamic there that's a lot different in sim than it is in AirRB. In AirRB, it's a lot easier to dodge the guns at slow speed because the guy can't pull into you anymore. In AirSB, because of unlimited AOA things, he can pull into you. So the fighting styles end up being different enough that they're two different things, but there will be parallels. Now, with all that being said, let's go through how to actually do all this. So number one, we're just gonna go to search aircraft, and we're just gonna type in RAF, and we'll probably have Rafale pop up. And sure enough, we got Rafale C2, and we can set all the parameters here. Your default parameters are 110% throttle, so that's full throttle, 30% fuel is MNGIS, and none of this stuff. The next thing we're going to do, we're not going to set the game version. Now, if you want to set the game version, you can actually compare old flight models to new ones, so when something gets changed, you can actually pull it up and look at the changes. Next thing we're going to pull up is the Gripin. So it's not going to be under Gripin, it's going to be under JAS, so JAS, and we're going to go with the 39C. Now, the 39C and the 39A are the same thing. All of them are the same, but it is shown in this program this way so that people don't keep asking exactly the same question. Now, we have a bunch of different charts here, and the one that we are looking for is going to be turn performance. So we click there, and we can set our parameters here where our start speed is 150 kph in true, and airspeed is 1300. Altitude is 100 meters, so basically sea level. Now, we can set a load factor limit. If we don't set a load factor limit, it's going to show us basically the load limit up until the airframe rips, and this would be useful for doing something like full manual controls. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set it at 11, because 11 is right around where SAS damping allows you to go, and it's also kind of like where you're going to be spending most of your time. Even in sim duels, I'm not pulling up to 14 Gs unless I'm in something like a flanker doing like Mach 1 rating kind of thing. And that's kind of like a niche, and we don't need to see that. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set an AOA limit. You don't have to, because if you don't, it's going to show you more information, and the information will be correct, but it's more applicable to manual controls. I'm going to set this to 29. Right now, what I want the program to do is allow you to set the AOA limit based on the plane, because the Rafale has a 29.5, 29-ish AOA limit, and the Gripin has around 25.5, 26, just kind of flat. The Gripin, even in manual controls, doesn't get the like 50 degrees AOA kind of goofy, like spin around on its tail thing. And this is why people kind of struggle with the plane at low speed, where at low speed, in very, very tight scissoring fights where like you're like nose to nose doing Top Gun stuff, other planes are going to be better at it than that. But the Gripin is still very strong in other regards. And when it comes to just conventional Mo1 circle, the Gripin doesn't need to pull a lot of AOA to cut its radius off and pull into a guy and get a shot. So even though it's not pulling a lot of AOA, for the AOA that it's pulling, it is moving quite a bit. Now, next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at specific excess power targets, and we're going to get rid of the 1200. I don't really care about the 1200. I want to get rid of this one, and I am going to get rid of this one, get rid of this one. I'm going to add my own, because I have a thing that I like doing, so we'll go 300, which is one that we just got rid of. We'll do 600. So these two positive numbers are going to be gain rates. So these are going to show turns where you're going to be gaining speed in. The next one we're going to add is minus 400. And we will do minus 800. And this will give us a reasonable comparison. You could add more, but once you add too many specific excess power targets, you end up with a bunch of overlapping lines, and it will be hard to distinguish things. Next, we go down to plane parameters. We can select basically one or the other. Both are min fuel, both are min wing sweep. Nothing's changed. No mass adjustment. It is just planes clean. And once that's done, we're going to hit our little calculation here. And we're going to have something that looks like an EM diagram spit out of this thing in about 3 to 7 seconds. And here we go. Here's our EM diagram. Now, how do you actually read this? Now, if you haven't watched any of my videos, I've gone over this time and time again, but I don't think that it hurts to refresh like what all these like little squiggly lines and stuff mean. And the first one that we're going to look at is kind of your initial turn rate. Your peak initial turn for both of these planes is going to be up here. This is kind of limited to the G limit. So JAS 39 for 11 Gs on min fuel 33.4, and then Rafale 32.5. Now that 11 G limit might be a little bit high for sea level because in my previous testing at sea level I got about 32 was my peak for the Gripin. So you could call it, you could maybe change this to like 10 and a half or whatever, but for all intents and purposes this is the same. You're probably not going to reach exactly these numbers here, but it's a good comparison. The next thing that we're going to look at is our sustained turn, because our sustained turn is SEP0. SEP0 is the sustained turn line. Sustained turn line is here. And what this is showing us is in comparison to Rafale and Gripin, the maximum turn rate for the Rafale under these parameters is 22.1 degrees, and for the Gripin it peaks out about 21.5. So this is better than this, but these are pretty close. Usually about a 2 degree to 3 degree per second advantage is something that is very noticeable. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to move up the graph. We're going to talk about bleed rates here, because bleed rates are incredibly important. This determines how well you hold speed in a tight turn. Basically, the plane with the lower bleed rate or the higher turn rate for the same bleed is going to perform better in the first turn. This is kind of what sets up your position for the rest of like your duel. And with the Gripin, we end up with SEP minus 800, 30 degrees per second. And for the Rafale, we are 1 degree per second less at around 29. And then as we move down, these lines parallel each other, so it's kind of more or less the same. But I have noticed in the past that these numbers do tend to, they don't stack necessarily, but this doesn't seem like a big difference, but in practice it is a very noticeable difference. We move down here to SEP minus 400, so this is a hard turn, but it's not like the hardest turn you can pull. So even here, SEP lines coincide, basically same bleed rate, and then as we get lower speed, the JAS 39 picks up some efficiency here. So overall, when it comes to this whole triangle here above SEP 0, the Gripin is going to turn more for less speed loss. So it means that if you have a bunch of speed in the Gripin, you can gain position and lose less speed. It means Rafale, as long as it's fighting in the negative zone, is going to potentially be losing position. Now, we're going to move down to a different thing. We're going to move below the SEP line, because the SEP line tells a different story. So positive SEP are turns where you're gaining speed. And in this case, SEP 300 means you're going to be gaining 300 feet per second worth of energy in this turn in these conditions. And what do we got here? SEP 300, Rafale 18.4 at this data point, and it climbs up to around 19.8, and Gripin kind of falls off. It's kind of not looking so hot. And then we move down here to SEP 600. Rafale, a lot better at gaining speed than the Gripin. The Gripin, on the other hand, though, is a good bit better at losing speed, or losing less speed, or losing speed slower. So you have advantages up here for the Gripin, advantages down here for the Rafale. The other thing, because of this AOA limit, these radiuses are not going to be correct. They'll be correct for the Rafale, but they will not be correct for the Gripin, because the Gripin only pulls around 25.5 and 26. So radius advantage still goes to Rafale, but you got to look at this here. These numbers are not radically different. 284 versus 281, not that big of a difference. It's not usually going to be enough of a difference that it should be like the overall deciding factor of the 1 versus 1. The one thing I do want to direct you at, though, is the Basically, this line here, this is maximum sustained rate with an ace crew. And for both of these planes, if you were just to sit at your speed that you don't black out in, you're looking at basically a zero point 0.4 degree per second difference. That's really not significant. Now, with all of that being said, before you go into the duel, before you go watch the rest of the video, what plane do you think is better in a 1 versus 1? What plane do you think wins more consistently? Quick, put your answers in, and then I'm going to show you what I think. All right, so the answers are in. And a lot of people probably looked at this and said that these gaps down here are really big, these gaps up here are really small, this is kind of the same, this is better for this. Overall, you're looking at this going, 3 out of 4 things favor Rafale. And maybe in the future, you might be right. But this line up here, this little gap here, is very significant. And if you're able to exploit this, the Gripin is able to win. And this is why, even talking to Willie, I think that the Gripin, he says, is able to win if it plays passive against the Rafale in ARB. And it just comes down to the Rafale, even though it picks up speed faster, it loses speed quicker. And if the Gripin decides to play basically in a speed range where it never really gets below this sustained turn line, where it just tries to maintain speed the whole time and do lag pursuit, it will eventually probably find a way to out-energy and out-position the Rafale. With that being said, if a Gripin comes in and he pulls as hard as he can, loses all of his energy, gets down to here, and Rafale stays up here, Rafale would come around. And if it gets to like a slow speed stall fight and one of them has to give up position or one of them has to decide to speed up, when it comes to speeding up, the Rafale is going to be better. It's going to get up to its rate speeds. It's going to get up to above its rate speed, and then it can pull in harder. And overall, when it comes to just looking at the chart, this is a perfect example of like where you can't really decide the outcome based on the chart. This is where practical testing comes in, and this is where we're going to go to the next part of the video. So for this first one, I'm going to be using sensor view, and then after that I'm not going to use it at all because I just don't like the way that it looks, because the yellow, the red, and then having all the extraneous stuff on the screen is to me overwhelming, and it just looks not good. So it's an aesthetic choice. But the big thing to look at here is the speeds that we merge at, the speeds that we are when we cross over on the second merge, and kind of the way that I play this. Because even though I said that the Gripin has a decisive advantage for its bleed rates, it doesn't mean that I'm going to be looking at that high speed stuff and being like, okay, I need to religiously hold like this amount of speed and do diagonals and then I'll be like perfectly fine. Like, no, you still have to use your eyes to play the game. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open with basically a 90-degree vertical turn, and he's going to open a little bit more flat. And my goal is to bait him into losing his energy, and I'm going to be more or less setting myself up to perpetually fly at his tail. This is the Growling Sidewinder like rate fight, but done like not just flat. So there's going to be points where I'll pull lead to close the distance, I'll pull lag to open the distance, and try to kind of cut him off and keep him from being able to really get his nose on me where he can shoot me down. And this guy is not the best. This is not like the best duel where it's like we're gonna play like 64 hours of the game to get like the best one ever. Like, this guy is above average, he's good enough, and this is good enough to teach from. So any of the duelers who are going to be in my comments going, well, no, actually, in a turn 2, he could have like whipped his nose 60 degrees and shot, like, it didn't happen. It didn't happen in like hardly any of these. There's one that they did win where I left my air brake out the whole time, but that was my skill issue. But as you can see, I'm just kind of perpetually like flying at his tail, letting him drain himself of energy, and really using like these alternating verticals, because as he comes down, and if he doesn't gain enough speed, he'll lose it on the way up. And this is where, looking at the chart, like, doesn't solve the problem, which is why I say the charts are a supplement to experience. They do not replace experience. So he comes in, he loses a bunch of energy, and he gives up all of his position. which allows me to start basically dead 6. And he's going to try to go to like his 900, 1000 kph rake speed, because he read the chart too, or he read the old chart and saw like, oh, I have an advantage at 1000, so he's like going to get to 1000. He assumes that if he just holds 1000, he'll eventually be able to raid around the circle. So I'm going to go up, and I'm basically going to park my plane above him, get enough altitude so that then I can pull down and then pull lead, close the distance, and basically just park myself behind him. Like, I am using what is called God's G-spot, because God was a freak. That's why he had to outlaw the gay sex, because he's like, oh crap, I gave men a prostate, and that might hurt reproduction if they figured out what that is. No, it's just a side topic anyways, but we just kind of sit behind him, and we're gonna just like hold down the trigger, shoot him down. Now this is actually 2 separate guys. I'm not gonna disclose their names. I might accidentally click the screen, you can see it, but like, I had 2 dudes in a game. They're like, oh no, the Rafale beats the Gripin. Like you just never fought someone in the Rafale that knows what they're doing. It's like, no, I don't think that it does, and they weren't able to prove it. Now, if someone better comes along in the Rafale and starts to win, then I'll believe him. Second one, I think this is the other guy. It might be the same guy. Same thing. This is a really bad merge, by the way. Like right here, if this was Air RB, that would be death. That there is easy shot in Air RB, impossible to hit in SB. But I conserve a bunch of speed, and I'm just going to spiral above. And it's just kind of like the ending of the last one. Go up, come down, start pulling hard. And the big advantage I have is with the verticals on the downward slope, I can gain a lot of position just because the plane's a little bit more efficient. I will lose position, potentially going up, but at this point, I'm chilling. I'm chilling. The duel is basically already over. He has tried to hit like an arbitrary rate speed, and he hasn't done it correctly. Now, War Thunder has like a weird thing where the best way to rate isn't necessarily just hitting the rate speed and holding that. Going above the rate speed and then pulling down into it, depending on your position, will actually cause you to effectively rate better. This is why the Gripin, even though it has like a sustained turn rate against some things, actually tends to do a lot better than you think it would. Next merge, more or less just exactly the same thing. Baiting him into pulling lead, into shots that he's not going to be able to take, where I'm holding speed on him. I'm holding speed and I'm going to lose position. He's going to be able to get behind me, but in Sim, it's not decisive. And I'm trying to park my plane above him where he comes up to me. I go down to him a little bit because I don't want to just let him stall into me and shoot me. But as you see, no wingtip vortices, just more or less holding speed, going around. And there's going to be points where he gains, where he's going to get close, and then he's going to start going the other direction. Now he makes a mistake here, and right here is we're going to start to pull in hard, close up kind of some of the distance, and we're just parking the plane behind him. Now instead of pulling lead, we're going to pull lag here, open the distance back up a little bit. Or I'm going to say that, but someone's going to be like, well, actually in this turn you were doing that. Like, whatever, I'm doing commentary by the seat of my pants, give me a break. But pull lag, and here we are nose to nose. But because I had more speed, and because the plane is more efficient, because I managed the energy better and understood what was going on to a better extent than he did, the Gripin is winning. And what has happened in testing, from what I have seen, from what I've been told, is Gripin can still consistently win against Rafale. Now maybe someone goes and cooks up a new trajectory, does some new trajectory shaping, because that's the official, like, real life nerd term for basically what practicing 1v1s is we're doing trajectory shaping when we do this. Like, the practical experience is something that's also way more important than the graph. That's why, like, when they're training the AI to eventually dogfight, like, they're using humans to train the AI to give it something to look at and then react to it. And that's why really the only guy who was like really successful against the DARPA AI that was made was like some dude who plays War Thunder. Like, he was the one guy who was able to win against it. And it really kind of, in that context, it does make sense, because if you're doing this obsessively and it's a video game, you can do it obsessively over and over and over again. And it's not like being a real pilot where you only get so many flight hours per year, and You will spend most of those times like doing things that require you to fly the plane, different kinds of missions, different kind of training objectives where, you know, my 1v1 duel, it's not something that you have all of the time in the world to like train on in real life. But in a video game, we do it because it's fun. That's literally it. I do it because I enjoy it. It's fun. It's entertaining. It's something that you guys can tune into and relate to. Now we get to this good position again where we're parked above and behind him and coming around our circle. So in these downwards, we can either conserve speed, gain up more of our speed for less sacrifice of our turn. And the one place that I really don't like to be in the Gripin is like perfectly flat. Like I don't want to be in symmetrical flat fight for too long, because that's when the little radar chart will come out and have the potential to kind of like bite you in the ass. But get the same thing, offset, come down, and we're going to just swing across the circle here, and he is not going to get hit. He's going to go up. He's going to try to... It looks like he's going to set up for like a scissors, but instead he's going to try to loop over. He's trying to use like his power to weight ratio to get position, but he's not in a spot to do it. The Gripin, yeah, it doesn't pull a lot of AoA, but it gets a lot of turn for the AoA that it does pull. That's kind of like the opposite of the MiG-29, by the way. The MiG-29, even the Su-27, if you've used both of those planes have a lot of AoA. They don't really seem to move a lot for that AoA. As in, like, when you pull AoA in the MiG-29, the thing that you notice is like, oh, I just slowed down a lot really quickly. And it means that its high AoA ability is, it's not useless, but it's not really used and utilized in the same way as, say, for instance, something like the old Grippy Gum Job. Now, he comes in, he blows through the merge, he's going to, like, try to go really fast and do, like, energy trapping stuff. And I just conserve speed, and because I have position, position is worth energy, is what it boils down to. Position, if you're on the guy's 6, means that he has to make a 180-degree turn, which is going to cost him energy in order to at least get, like, a neutral merge. Or he's going to have to fight from this position, which is really going to be hard for him. And I do the same thing. I go up, I cut inside of his turn. He's making this gigantic circle where he thinks he's going to outrate, but I go up, I come down, we're going to tickle God's G-spot, and then we're going to tickle him with our baby plane. Because the baby plane, in spite of what a lot of people say about it being nerfed and useless now, is still one of the best dogfighting planes in the game, and even in Sim EC, it's still going to be pretty relevant. The plane did not just become bad overnight. Having 700 countermeasures, having tiny flight model, having very good initial turn, very good dogfighting performance, pretty good guns, good cockpit, pretty decent radar, all of that is still relevant. Even the British Gripin, even with its measly 4 R darters and 2 9Ms, is a very reasonable plane to play. Moving on to what I'm going to call this like one of the last ones. I think we're getting close to the end here, and we're just going to kind of showcase a little bit more stuff. We kind of merge more vertically. He's starting to match the more vertical merge instead of going flat and trying to deny me the ability to kind of park in on top of him. He's going to pull in here. It's like he almost has a shot, but that has sacrificed a lot of his energy. Going down, he's going to recover a little bit. And he's going to do kind of the things that Rafales do and the things that Eurofighters do, where in the manual controls mode, when they turn off SAS damping, they can pull a lot of AoA. That a lot of AoA that you can pull is good in some situations, but it also kills your energy. Planes like the J-10, Eurofighter, Rafale, they can all kind of like rotate around on their axis, but doing that is really hard to aim. And really one of the best ways to counter tactics like that is to just kind of park above them, because they have the same issue that like things like the Harriers do when they get into like the VTOL mode. Like they can point up and then they backflip and then they die. But we do the same thing. We eventually get our position. We're able to shoot the Rafale down. Not really a big deal. And in a guns-only fight, these go pretty much the same way. More or less every time if you understand what you are doing. Now, as people get more experience with the Rafale, as People learn how to play the plane better. Maybe those change. He comes in, he goes for a first shot. He doesn't actually have it. If he goes in manuals mode, maybe he gets there, but if he misses, he has no energy, and then he copes and seethes. We get enough space in between us. This is just going to be a head-on. I don't take it. I usually don't shoot in like pure head-ons like that because like I'm just testing the plane at this point. I just want to like showcase what the differences in the planes are. And we're going to relax our turn, go up, and we're doing exactly the same thing over and over again. The more time we spend going down and pulling hard, the better off we're going to be. The more time we spend not having to gain speed at low speed to high speed, we'll be better off. So if we time everything correctly, we'll do pretty darn good. We go in, we miss our shot, and we're just going to loop over behind him. He is going to try to force like this low speed scissors fight. We're going to take it. We don't need to really be afraid of it because, as I said, you don't pull a lot of AOA, but you do get a lot of a good radius out of the AOA that you pull. We air brake, and the air brake there is just to slow down a little bit so that we're not shooting in front of him to cut the radius off. And we miss our shot. He misses his shot. He's struggling due to the manuals mode, and because I'm in damping and the Gripin is limited, I get the follow-up. And even though on paper my radius, my AOA, the Gripin is still really competitive. It's not my favorite play in the game. I don't really like it, and I don't really like it because of like all the fans, but it is still unequivocally good. He comes in at the no speed merge, and we're just going to go up. We extend. We got so much space in between us and him that even without like gun timer, any of that stuff, like he's not going to do anything, and it looks exactly the same. We are exploiting the low speed bleed of the plane. We're also exploiting his little bit higher bleed, but we're also exploiting experience too, because the charts do not replace experience. They can supplement it, they can help articulate points, but they do not replace going out and actually playing the damn game. Anyways, that's your Beer Thunder Christmas special. I hope you guys had a Merry Christmas, and I'll see you guys New Year's.